Part 3, Chapter 6 of Life and Lillian Gish. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Carolyn Lilliard. Life and Lillian Gish by Albert Bigelow Paine. Part 3, Chapter 6, The Scarlet Letter. Lillian had not found time to go to New York. Through no fault of hers, the production of La Bohème had been delayed, and there was not a moment to lose now. La Bohème was finished on Saturday, and the first shots of the Scarlet Letter were made the following Monday. She had agreed to do as many as 6 pictures, and she had 2 years to do them in. She was very anxious to fulfill her part of the contract. Her mother was with her. She had come out with her in May, but in September had gone back to London, where Dorothy was making Neil Gwynn for an English company. Now again she was back, vainly, unwisely, trying to share herself with both daughters. In January, Lillian had taken Mrs. Pickford's house at Santa Monica, directly on the beach. She believed it would be better for her mother. Not always warm, but there was nearly always sunshine, and the air was good. Every morning Lillian went into the sea. The water was cold, but by 6 she had put on her bathing suit and plunged in. A dip, then out again, a race to the house, a cup of hot water that Nellie, the maid, had ready. Then quickly into a little roadster, and away to the Culver City lot, a brisk 20-minute drive. Nellie there prepared breakfast, while her mistress was dressing and making up. In her little corner of Beacom Terrace, the den, as she calls it, overlooking the East River, where a procession of water traffic moves always up and down, stout, saucy tugs with square-nosed barges, or droopy, submissive schooners in tow, swift sound steamers, smudgy freighters, private yachts, very romantic and expensive-looking, all the motley parade of the Marine Register. Lillian not so long ago told of the making of the Scarlet Letter. She said, "It was while we were making La Bohème that I worked with Frances Marion on the story. Hawthorne's Hester Prynne appealed to me, and I thought the story had great picture possibilities. There was one objection. The church would oppose it, the Protestant church, especially the Methodist." The Scarlet Letter was one of a list of prescribed books, forbidden for picture use. I took the matter up with Will Hayes and prominent members of the clergy. Why should the church prohibit a great classic like that? When I told them how I proposed to present it, they gave their sanction. When they saw the picture, by and by, they recommended it. My idea was to present Hester as the victim of hard circumstance, swept off her feet by love. Of course, that was what she was, but her innate innocence must be apparent. I said, "I believe in the Scarlet Letter, if we can get the right man for Dimmesdale, the minister." We considered several, but none would do. One day, Louis B. Mayer, business head of the Metro, said to me, "I think I have found the minister for your Scarlet Letter." Mayer had brought over Greta Garbo, and I had faith in him. Garbo had done a picture of Gustav Berling in Sweden with Lars Hansen, and the Metro had brought over a print of it. "Go into the projection room and have them run it for you," said Mayer. "If you like Hansen for the part, we'll bring him over." The moment Lars Hansen appeared on the screen, I knew he was the man we wanted. And I knew that we must have a Swedish director. The Swedish people are closer to what our Pilgrims were, or what we consider them to have been, than are present-day Americans. Irving Thalberg selected Victor Seastrom, a splendid choice. He got the spirit of the story exactly, and was himself a fine actor, the finest that ever directed me. I never worked with anyone I liked better than Seastrom. He was Scandinavian, thorough and prompt. If Mr. Seastrom said we would start at 8 or half past, The camera was ready at that time, and so were we. His direction was a great education for me. In a sense, I went through the Swedish school of acting. I had got rather close to the Italian school in Italy, watching them at their theaters, and from being associated with those who were with us in The White Sister and Romola. The Italian school is one of elaboration. The Swedish is one of repression. Mr. Vidor's method, of the American school, if there is such a thing, leaned to self-expression, which has its advantages. We had some of the people used in La Bohème, Carl Dane, for one, who, except for the brief scene where a scrap of my forbidden laundry creates a situation and finally flares out on a currant bush, furnished about all the comedy of that too sad picture. Henry B. Walthall, with whom I had played so often in the old Griffith days, was engaged to do Prynne, Hester's husband. In the old days, he had been taller than I was. I was amazed now to find it the other way about. I had grown a good deal in the 10 or 11 years since then. I suppose exercise, open air, health, and proper food had been responsible. Joyce Coad, my little girl in the play, was a sweet child and a clever little actress. I became much attached to her. Work on the Scarlet Letter went off smoothly until we were within 2 weeks of the end. Then, one day in April, I got a paralyzing cable from Dorothy in London. Dorothy had been over for a brief visit during the winter, and Mother had presently followed her back to London. She had not wanted to go, not really. She had not been well for years. Commuting back and forth across 6,000 miles, trying to be with both of us, had been too much for her. That last time she would not let me go to the train with her. Dorothy's cable said that she was dying. I cabled and got the latest news of her. She had had a stroke. I said I would take the first ship I could get from New York. I found that by leaving Los Angeles in 3 days, I could catch the Majestic out of New York, which would put me in London the last day of April. It was the 15th that she had been struck down. At the studio, Seastrom said that by working day and night, we could do the remaining 2 weeks on the picture in the 3 days I had left. I asked the company if they would stay with me through it, and every one said yes. They were all so fine. We didn't waste a moment, and during those 3 days and nights there was very little sleep for anyone. I remember scarcely anything of the details, for of course I had Mother on my mind, too. When the last scene was shot, I made a rush for the train without stopping to change from my costume. Mr. Mayer and Mr. Thalberg got special police on motorcycles to escort me and clear the way, so that I could work to the last moment and still get on the train. 12 days later, I was in London. Characteristically, Lillian says nothing of that trip across land and sea. Miss Moore, less reticent, writes, "I shall always remember the kindness and sympathy shown her during those long, wearisome days on the train. The little Catholic girl at Albuquerque, who somehow or other managed to find her way to our compartment and press into Lillian's hand a little silver cross, which she said had been specially blessed and would surely bring an answer to her prayers for her mother." At Topeka, Kansas, when the train pulled in, we noticed that the platform was jammed from end to end with people. We supposed that they must have come to welcome someone, and pulled down the blinds in the compartment to escape notice. Suddenly we heard raps on the window, and calls for Miss Gish. The conductor appeared, smiling, to say that all these people had come to see Miss Gish. Some of them had even driven 100 miles for the purpose. Tired and heartsick as she was, Lillian went out on the platform of the train. The moment she appeared, a sudden silence fell on the crowd. They just stood and looked at her. Then a woman held up a baby and asked her to touch it, for luck. That broke up the formality. They crowded round her, expressing their sympathy and good wishes, and they were still in the midst of it when the train pulled out, leaving them cheering and waving. We arrived in New York on the morning of the day the Majestic sailed. When, late that night, we went on board the boat, we found our stateroom filled with people, all waiting to see Lillian. One pleasant young man with an ingratiating smile insisted upon bringing in his girlfriend to meet Lillian, who, tired as she was, still managed to smile at them. In London, Lillian learned just what had happened. Dorothy had been out to a play, and had come in quietly and slipped into bed without turning on the light. Mrs. Gish slept in the other twin bed. Presently, Dorothy felt something touch her. She spoke softly, but got no answer. She felt the touch again, and again no answer. The third time, she snapped on the light. Her mother could not speak. All her right side was helpless. Fortunately, Dorothy's bed had been at her left. With Lillian's arrival, Mrs. Gish improved. Only the day before she had not been expected to live. She seemed to recognize her. Her eyes grew large. Every paper had displayed in headlines Lillian's race across the world to her mother's bedside, and the English are a kindly people. Noble and commoner alike came forward with offered help. All ranks knew and loved her. Cards, flowers, gifts poured in. What was to be done next? Lillian must return to California or cancel her contract. What could she do? Miss Moore tells what happened. One night somebody suggested going to a famous little restaurant in the Tottenham Court Road district for dinner. So Dorothy, Lillian, and I got into a taxi and drove to it, 3 very forlorn females. It was over that dinner that Lillian came to what seemed at first her preposterous decision to take her mother back with her to California. But, as usual, she carried her point, and within a week Mrs. Gish, with a good English doctor and nurse in attendance, Lillian and I were all aboard the Mauretania en route for New York. Mrs. Gish bore the journey much better than we had expected, and the days passed quickly. The morning we arrived at Quarantine, Lillian and I were sitting up in bed eating breakfast, when our stewardess rushed in looking quite alarmed, to warn us to bolt all the doors, as our stateroom was shortly to be stormed by a mob of reporters. Lillian herself told of the hectic overland journey. In New York, I chartered a private car and took Mother to Hollywood. I was no longer so poor, and if ever there was a time when I was thankful for money, it was then. Across the blazing southern desert we had tubs of ice, with fans going over them, night and day. The car was cool, and the change, or the thought that she was going back to California, which she always loved, was good for Mother. When we reached California, instead of being on her back, she was sitting up. But she could not speak. She knew all that we said to her, but she could not answer, and she could no longer read. We were told that this condition might last 3 to 6 months. That was 5 years ago. She has improved a great deal. She can walk a little, but most of her right side is helpless, and her words are very limited. At Santa Monica we lived in Mrs. Pickford's house until September, then moved up to the beautiful Millbank place on the cliff, with a lovely garden, and all, away from the dampness and the sound of the waves, which made Mother nervous. On her birthday, September 16, she seemed suddenly to pick up, and we felt there was a chance for her to get well. She does not suffer, but must get very tired of always being obliged to sit or lie down. But she is sweet and patient. The nurse and I read to her, and she enjoys working the picture puzzles, of which she has always a supply. She likes motion picture magazines. She cannot read them, but she loves the illustrations, many of them of people she knows. And always, if the name Gish is on any printed page, she can find it. The Scarlet Letter had its premiere in August 1926 at the Central Theater, New York City. The Evening Sun next day, among other things, said, "Miss Gish, For the first time in the memory of the oldest inhabitant of the cinema palaces plays a mature woman, a woman of depth, of feeling and wisdom and noble spirit. She is not Hawthorne's Hester Prynne, but she is yours and mine, and she makes the Scarlet Letter worth a visit. The Sun man's notice was a fair sample of other printed opinions at home and abroad. Critics who were anxious to show that they were familiar with Hawthorne sometimes worked themselves up over the departure from the original story, and sometimes took it out on Lillian and Lars Hansen. But generally they had only good things to say of the acting of these two, of little Joyce Coad and the others, and of Seastrom's fine direction. Seastrom had created New England atmosphere on a Culver City lot, a fact not always suspected. Lillian had hoped that some of the scenes might really be made in New England, but Seastrom's imagination had served as well, perhaps better. No fault was found here, indeed, very little anywhere. Critics who went prepared to do their worst forgot all about it when they saw Lillian in her little Puritan cap, her expressive back in its little Puritan waist, and especially when she sat in the stocks, for running and playing on ye Sabbath, leaning feverishly out to drink from the cup of cold water brought her by the conscience-stricken minister. One hardened critic wrote, "I retire from the field with tears in my eyes and rage in my heart, as becomes a cynic betrayed and undone. To consider her critically is beyond my powers. She simply annihilates the instinct. Of this much I am quite sure. She is a very great artist, and by far the most appealing and human little figure appearing on the screen today, and the loveliest." 3 or 4 years ago, in a big barn of a theatre in southern France, the writer of these pages first saw The Scarlet Letter, and went home in a daze, waking up now and then to damn his Puritan ancestors. In the seat next his had sat a small, intense Frenchwoman, who at one point had said tearfully to her companion, "Regardez, Leontine, regardez son pauvre petit os." "Look, Leontine, look at her poor little back." And just now I read a paragraph which said, "Lillian Gish can convey more pathos with her back than any other actress with all her features." I agree with that, and I am not going by my first impression. I have seen the picture again, very recently, with Lillian, in the New York Metro-Goldwyn projection room. Association had destroyed none of the illusion. The effect was the same, heightened. We left the crash and glare of 9th Avenue for the comparative seclusion of a cab. Lillian said, presently, "I was too immature to play that part. She was a woman. I looked just like a child." "You looked young, certainly, but not too young for Hester. That Hester." Of course, the real Hester, supposing there ever was one, was not at all your Hester. She was less, more what the others were. She assented a little doubtfully. I stumbled on. "If I might offer a humble opinion, you did not turn Lillian Gish into Hester Prynne. You turned Hester Prynne into something, well, something more exquisite." "Some of the critics didn't think so. They said—" "I know the things they said. I have those scrapbooks, where you carefully preserved all the worst ones. A critic, a young critic, does not think he is doing his duty unless he puts a little sting into what he writes. The cup he offers must have its drop of hemlock, even when he proffers it on bended knee." La Bohème and The Scarlet Letter were popular abroad. From Europe, from the farthest East, the letters came. Oriental young men, in exquisite calligraphy and quaint phrase, told her how she was adored, begged for a photograph, a written line. Some suggested pictures they hoped she would do, Joan of Arc among them. End of Part 3, Chapter 6.